So after a strategic pause and not for the first couple of years of the administration, last year, the Biden administration kind of started a flurry of negotiations in the trade space. They are negotiating what they call non-free trade agreements that are not actually free trade agreements, but they have a lot of the same elements. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework includes a number of countries that were part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, that was widely opposed in the U.S. And they're negotiating with Kenya, another strategic trade and investment partnership. They've also announced negotiations with 13 countries in Latin America. And these are amorphous, a little vague in terms of what actually will happen. One positive from our view is that they are not seeking investor-state dispute settlement or any investment provisions, which civil society has long opposed. They are not seeking intellectual property chapter or provisions that have been so damaging for access to medicines and technology transfers and so forth. And they're not seeking procurement measures that would impact government's ability to invest tax dollars in areas where they feel like are important. So those are some positives, and they're not seeking market access terms. However, they are still being negotiated behind closed doors, in secret, without sufficient civil society participation. They've signed 5-year secrecy agreements with countries that you cannot actually see what the texts will be until 5 years after they are negotiated, which is a huge concern, obviously, for civil society. There's still a trade advisory system that includes 500 corporate advisors who can see access to the text while we cannot. So obviously we are skeptical and concerned. We want to make sure that that a worker-centered policy that President Biden has put forward is actually achieved. And we're very concerned about big tech companies that are wanting to replicate the damaging provisions that were in the U.S.-Mexico agreement that would make it much more difficult for governments to regulate big tech in the public interest. So we have concerns about that. We're also concerned about the importance of building on the improvements that were in the USMCA around labor provisions. We need to see binding and enforceable labor and environmental standards, and whether they are able to achieve that in this Indo-Pacific Economic Framework negotiation really remains to be seen, because we can't see what's actually being negotiated. And similarly, there are concerns around a push for a chapter around good regulatory practices, which could allow corporations to intervene early in the regulation process in various countries to water down regulation. So we still have a lot of concerns about what the direction of those might be, but also it is important to recognize that the political shift in the U.S. around the free trade agenda is being taken into account, and that the elites and President Biden himself, who supported NAFTA, who supported the past free trade agreements, is taking a very different approach and saying that we need a worker-centered, different model that is not a traditional free trade agreement. So it remains to be seen kind of what happens, but we're tracking that closely. We've been going to negotiating rounds, been trying to influence the outcome to ensure that we don't end up going back to the status quo free trade agreements of the past.